David was 69 years old, a retired construction engineer from Charleston, South Carolina. For 37 years, he had slept next to the same woman. His wife, Barbara, knew the rhythm of his breathing, the way most of us know the sound of our own heart. For 37 years, that rhythm had been the background music of her nights. On October 14th, at 3:47 in the morning, Barbara woke up because the music had stopped. She reached across the bed and placed her hand on David's chest. It was still warm, but it was not moving. David had died somewhere between his last exhale and the moment Barbara opened her eyes. The autopsy identified the cause as a massive cerebral hemorrhage. A blood vessel in his brain had ruptured while he slept. But what the autopsy could not tell Barbara is that David's death was not sudden. It was the final page of a slow story his body had been writing for years, and every single chapter of that story had unfolded in the hours between 2 and 6 in the morning. David had done nothing wrong that night. He had eaten a light dinner. He had taken his blood pressure medication. His last words to Barbara were about the weather. There was no warning sign that any physician could have told him to watch for, and yet every mechanism that killed David that night was already active in his body long before he closed his eyes. Tonight, I need to share what happens in the human body between 2 and 6 in the morning after the age of 60, because in more than 20 years of neurosurgery, the strokes I watched come through the ICU did not happen during busy afternoons. They happened in the silence of bedrooms, while spouses slept beside them, while no one was watching in nearly every case. The contributing factors were not mysterious. They were 5 specific physiological events that unfold in an aging body during the deepest hours of the night. 5 events that almost no physician has 15 minutes to explain to you properly. You're going to learn what those 5 events are. You're going to learn which one of them, more than any of the others, took David's life. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what to do before you close your eyes tonight to protect yourself from becoming the next David. My name is Dr. Marcus Reeve. For 20 years, I worked as a neurosurgeon, operating on and near the smallest blood vessels of the human brain. My hands have been closer to those vessels than most will ever experience. And I can tell you with complete honesty, the majority of the cerebral events I repaired in my career did not happen in the moment they became emergencies. They happened over years, in the background, during the hours when no one was paying attention. This channel exists to bridge the gap between what research knows and what your 15-minute appointment has time to cover. So let me start with the question almost nobody thinks to ask: why 3 in the morning? Because your cardiovascular and nervous systems do not shut off when you fall asleep. They shift in a young body. That nighttime mode works beautifully. Blood pressure falls by 10 to 20%. The heart slows. Blood vessels relax, but somewhere after the age of 60, that nighttime mode begins to break down. The signals that used to be strong become quieter. The margin of safety that used to be generous becomes razor thin. The protective mechanisms that used to catch problems before they became emergencies begin to switch off. One by one, in the hours between midnight and dawn, by 3 in the morning, an aging body is operating with a skeleton crew. Blood pressure regulation is impaired, fluid balance is compromised, oxygen delivery is less consistent, the nervous system is less responsive to sudden changes. This is why the hours between 2 and 6 in the morning carry the highest risk of stroke and heart attack for adults over 60, not the afternoon. The quiet hours, the hours when your body is most vulnerable and least able to defend itself. Whether you become a statistic during those hours is determined by 5 specific physiological events, all happening in parallel, interacting and accelerating with age. David's body did not fail him because it was defective. It failed him because it was operating in the most demanding hours of the 24-hour cycle with an accumulated set of vulnerabilities he had no idea existed. Let me show you the first one. The first event begins around 2 in the morning, and it is the one most people would never guess is happening. Your blood pressure surges, not falls, surges, for most of the night. Your blood pressure follows the pattern I described. It drops, it rests. It gives your cardiovascular system a break. But sometime between 2 and 4 in the morning, your body begins preparing itself to wake up. Cortisol, the hormone your adrenal glands release to bring you back to consciousness, starts to rise hours before you actually open your eyes. In a young body, this pre-waking surge is smooth and gentle. In a body over 60, it is a spike. Your arteries, which have stiffened over decades, cannot absorb that spike the way they did at 40. The pressure wave hits vessels that no longer flex, and in a small number of people every single night, that spike is what ruptures a plaque or bursts a weakened vessel wall in the brain. There is a name for this. Cardiologists call it the morning surge phenomenon. Research published in the journal Hypertension has shown that adults over 60 with poorly timed blood pressure medication experience surges that can push their systolic pressure 50 points higher between 3 and 5 in the morning than at any other point in the 24-hour cycle, 50 points in the hours when their arteries are most fragile. The solution is not complicated, but it requires a conversation your doctor may not have had time to bring up. Ask specifically whether your blood pressure medication should be taken in the evening instead of the morning. There is strong evidence, including from a large chronotherapy trial, that evening dosing significantly reduces cardiovascular events during sleep. That single question, 2 minutes. It may be the most important conversation you have with your doctor this year. If this information resonates, if you've ever wondered why so many strokes and heart attacks happen at night, please do me a small favor. Hit the subscribe button. Type the word surge in the comments. So, I know you're following along. It tells the algorithm this information belongs in front of more people over 60 who need to hear it. Now, let me show you the second event, because it is the one that quietly amplifies everything that comes after it. By 3 in the morning, most adults over 60 are in a state of mild dehydration, not severe, not the kind that would land you in a hospital, but enough to change something fundamental about the fluid moving through your arteries. Your blood becomes thicker. Think of it this way: you have not had any water for 7, maybe 8 hours. You have been losing fluid the entire time through breathing and through the invisible sweat your skin releases even in cool rooms, and after 60, your thirst signal, the mechanism that tells you to drink, is measurably weaker than it was at 40. You went to bed already partially dehydrated. Now at 3 in the morning, you're more so thicker. Blood does not flow the same way. It moves more slowly through vessels that may already be narrowed by decades of accumulated plaque. It clots more easily. And here's the timing problem almost nobody explains. During sleep, your heart rate has slowed, your circulation has slowed, your body has been motionless for hours. Slow circulation, thick blood, narrowed arteries, motionless body. That combination is one of the primary reasons the early morning hours account for a disproportionate share of stroke and heart attack events in older adults. The solution costs nothing. Drink 1 full glass of water before bed, not a large amount, about 8 ounces. Keep another glass on your bedside table. If you wake up thirsty at 4 in the morning, your body is asking for something your cardiovascular system also needs. Do not let the fear of getting up to use the bathroom convince you that dehydrating yourself is the safer choice. It is not. Not after 60. The third event is the one I have seen ruin more otherwise healthy cardiovascular systems than almost anything else in older adults. And most people who have it have absolutely no idea. Sleep apnea. If you snore heavily, or if the person sleeping next to you snores, I need you to take this seriously. Because what sleep apnea does to your body between 2 and 6 in the morning is not subtle. Here's what actually happens during an apnea event. You stop breathing for 10 seconds, sometimes 40, sometimes longer. Your blood oxygen drops, your brain detects the crisis, and floods your system with adrenaline. Your heart rate spikes, your blood pressure jumps, and then you start breathing again, usually without ever waking up fully enough to remember it. Now imagine that happening 30, 40, sometimes 50 times in a single night, every night for years. More than 30% of adults over 60 have some form of sleep apnea. The vast majority have never been diagnosed, and research has consistently linked untreated sleep apnea to a 3-fold increase in the risk of heart attack and a dramatically elevated risk of stroke, particularly during the early morning hours when apnea events cluster. The warning signs are not always the snoring itself. Watch for morning headaches, waking up exhausted despite a full night in bed, frequent nighttime urination, waking with a dry mouth or a sensation of gasping. If any of that sounds familiar, ask your doctor for a sleep study. It is not optional after 60 if you have any cardiovascular risk. It is essential care. The treatment, most often a CPAP device, is not glamorous, but the evidence for what it does to blood pressure, atrial fibrillation, and cardiac risk is remarkable. One device, one habit, enormous protection. Comment APNEA below. If this sounds like you or someone you love, your comment may be the one that reaches another family in time. The fourth event is the one almost nobody in mainstream cardiology talks about with older adults, and it is one of the most important. Your vagus nerve begins to fail you at night. The vagus nerve is the master conductor of your parasympathetic nervous system, the system responsible for slowing your heart, regulating your breathing rhythm, and maintaining the electrical stability of your heart's own natural pacemaker. During deep sleep, healthy vagal tone is what keeps your heart rate smooth and steady. But after the age of 60, vagal function begins to weaken, and here is what almost no one explains in the hours between 2 and 4 in the morning. Vagal signaling reaches its lowest point of the 24-hour cycle, even in a young, healthy body. In an aging body, that low point becomes a dangerous silence. When vagal tone falls too low, the electrical stability of your heart begins to wobble. Atrial fibrillation, the most common serious arrhythmia in older adults, disproportionately begins in the early morning hours for exactly this reason, and atrial fibrillation is not a minor problem. It is the single most common cause of stroke in adults over 70. Most nighttime arrhythmias go completely unnoticed. You do not wake up. You do not feel your heart flutter. The event happens, resolves, and leaves behind only a slightly increased risk of the clot that eventually forms and travels to your brain days or weeks later. The good news is that vagal tone is trainable. Slow nasal breathing before bed, 4 seconds in, 6 seconds out for 5 minutes, measurably improves vagal signaling overnight. So does finishing dinner at least 3 hours before you lie down, which prevents your digestive system from competing with your parasympathetic recovery. 2 habits, no cost, real protection. Now, I have to tell you about the 5th event, and this one I need you to pay attention to, because this is the event that killed David. This is also the event I spent 20 years watching from the closest possible vantage point, the operating table. Your brain does something extraordinary that almost no other organ can do. It regulates its own blood supply independently, moment to moment. When your blood pressure rises, the small vessels in your brain constrict slightly to protect the delicate tissue behind them. When your blood pressure falls, those same vessels dilate to maintain flow. This mechanism is called cerebral autoregulation, and it is one of the reasons the brain in a healthy body is protected from the fluctuations happening everywhere else. But cerebral autoregulation weakens with age. Slowly, silently, and it weakens most dramatically during the hours when the rest of your cardiovascular system is also struggling, between 2 and 6 in the morning. Here is what that means in practice. Every one of the 4 events I have just described, the blood pressure surge, the thickened blood, the apnea-driven adrenaline spikes, the vagal silence, all 4 of them place stress on the small vessels of your brain at exactly the moment when those vessels have lost the ability to protect themselves. I spent 2 decades operating on the aftermath of that combination, the ruptures, the bleeds, the strokes that families were told came out of nowhere. They did not come out of nowhere. They came out of 4 hours of accumulated vulnerability during which the brain's own defense system had been silently offline. David's cerebral hemorrhage did not happen because of one thing. It happened because his morning blood pressure surge hit a vessel that his weakened autoregulation could no longer buffer. All 5 events converged in the wrong vessel, at the wrong hour, in a body that had no idea it was carrying that much accumulated risk. That is the event that took him. When Barbara sat across from me 3 weeks after David's funeral, she asked the question every family in her position eventually asks. Could I have known the honest answer? The answer I have given more families than I can count is that David's specific event at 3:47 on that specific morning could not have been predicted, but the pattern that led to it could have been. And it should have been. David had been treated for high blood pressure for 11 years. He had taken his medication every morning. He had never been asked about evening dosing. He had complained to his family doctor about waking up exhausted 3 separate times over the past 2 years. He had never been referred for a sleep study. He had cut back on evening water because he was tired of getting up at night. No one had told him that dehydration in an aging body was its own risk. None of these were failures of David's care and isolation. Each one was reasonable on its own terms. But together, over years, they built the accumulated vulnerability that failed him at 3:47 in the morning on October 14th. Barbara asked me one more thing before she left that afternoon. She asked whether I would be willing to make what she learned useful to other people. That is why this video exists. In 20 years of neurosurgery, I have stood over more cerebral hemorrhages at 3 and 4 in the morning than I can count. I have sat with families in hospital corridors at dawn, families who had wished their loved one good night just a few hours earlier and had no reason to believe anything was wrong. In case after case, the contributing factors were not exotic. They were not mysterious. They were the same 5 events happening in the same aging body during the same vulnerable hours, night after night for years. The heart attacks and strokes I repaired did not happen because of bad luck. They happened because of missing information, the information the patient simply never received. You now have that information. What you do with it tonight, not next week, not after your next appointment. Tonight is what determines whether this video mattered. So let me give you the 5 things to do before you close your eyes tonight. First, drink a full glass of water. Keep another glass on your nightstand. Do not go to bed dehydrated. Second, at your next appointment, ask specifically whether your blood pressure medication should be moved to evening dosing. That single conversation may be the most important one you have this year. Third, if you or your spouse snores heavily, or if you wake up exhausted despite a full night in bed, ask for a sleep study. Do not wait. Fourth, practice slow nasal breathing before sleep. 4 seconds in through the nose, 6 seconds out, 5 minutes. It is free, and the evidence is real. Fifth, finish your dinner at least 3 hours before you lie down. Give your parasympathetic system a fighting chance to do its work while you sleep. 5 habits. No cost, real protection. During the hours your body is most vulnerable. So tonight, commit to these 5 steps. If this video has given you something your 15-minute appointment has never had time to explain, please share it. Send it to someone over 60 in your life. A spouse, a parent, a friend, someone who has never connected their nighttime routine to the health of their heart and their brain. Your share may be the reason another Barbara does not wake up at 3:47 in the morning to a silence she was not prepared for. Subscribe to this channel. Every week, we close a little more of the gap between what the research knows and what the appointment has time to say. One final note, and I want to say this clearly. Everything I have shared with you today is general educational information based on peer-reviewed cardiovascular and neurological research and on 20 years of clinical experience. It is not a substitute for personalized medical care from a physician who knows your individual history. Before making any changes to your medication, especially the timing of your blood pressure medication, please consult your own doctor. Never stop, start, or adjust a prescription based on a video. Not this one. Not any other. The character of David in this video represents a composite of patients I have cared for over 2 decades. His story reflects real patterns I have seen repeatedly in clinical practice, but no single patient's medical outcome should be interpreted as a prediction of your own. This channel exists to inform your conversations with your doctor, not to replace them. Take care of yourself, take care of the people you love. See you in the next video.